I need to head back to my hometown for a while. Can you watch over my house while I'm away? I asked Nancy, James' wife, with a bit of hesitation. You don't have to come back at all, even if you're my husband's mom. I don't want to live with some stranger, some old lady, she replied, showing her disrespect. Seriously? Whose house does she think this is? Besides, it's too big for Linda to live in alone, right? We'll take care of it, so don't worry. We'll change the locks, so it won't matter if you come back. Too bad. Ever since I moved in with James and Nancy, her behavior has been terrible. I've had enough. Fine, I won't come back here anymore. Really? Yes, really. Just do whatever you want from now on. I, Linda, harbor a secret side that even James isn't aware of. What would Nancy make of it if she found out? Quietly, I packed my things and left the house. My name's Linda. I've been on my own since my husband Thomas passed away 3 years back. At 57, I tied the knot with Thomas, a co-worker of the same age, when I was just 24. We didn't have much money, but we had spirit, I suppose. We were just young and full of hope. Soon after our wedding, I discovered I was expecting and gave birth to James the following year. After my maternity leave, I threw myself into both work and raising our child. We entertained the idea of having another baby, but finances just wouldn't allow it then. Thomas hailed from a wealthy family, yet he adamantly refused their help. He had a strained relationship with his father and left home, almost like a runaway. Maybe out of that same stubbornness, James, as serious-minded as his dad, graduated from college and snagged a job at a prestigious company. He excelled professionally and was highly regarded, but his personal life struggled, remaining single well into his 30s. We tied the knot young, full of vigor, but it seemed we didn't follow in our parents' footsteps in that regard. James, when will I get to meet my grandkid? That was Thomas's constant refrain. While our marriage might have been early, it was unusual to find someone in their 30s with no dating history like James. In our time, folks always had tales of their weekend companions. Looking back, it was a more carefree era. Thomas eagerly awaited James settling down, but he passed away suddenly 2 years ago, never seeing it happen, taken by a sudden heart attack. By the time he reached the hospital, it was too late. Overwhelmed by sorrow, I quit my job and stayed home. Luckily, Thomas's insurance covered the rest of the mortgage, and I had my retirement savings, so finances weren't an immediate concern. The house we lived in was newly built, purchased when we were nearly 30, brimming with memories of Thomas. After his passing, James and I agreed to transfer Thomas's share to me. Splitting the house wasn't feasible, and I planned to eventually pass it on to James. When I broached the subject with him, he confessed out of the blue, "I found someone I want to marry." I was taken aback. "What? You had a girlfriend? Why keep it from me? Dad was waiting all this time. I meant to tell you, but the right moment never seemed to come." Sorry. It was ironic that Thomas, who had eagerly awaited James's marriage, was no longer with us. The following weekend, James brought his partner to our house. "Mom, let me introduce you. This is Nancy. Nice to meet you." "I'm Nancy," she said, dressed flamboyantly and seeming quite mismatched for James, who had led a serious life until then. "Still," I remarked, "you seem cheerful and kind, don't you?" I trusted that if James chose her despite her appearance, her character must be decent. Nancy glanced around our home, scrutinizing everything. I felt a bit uneasy. "Is everything okay? You seem deep in thought," I asked Nancy. "Oh, nothing. Just taking it all in. So this is where James grew up. By the way, Mom, there's something else I'd like to discuss," James began. "What is it?" James proposed skipping the wedding ceremony and just registering the marriage. Since his one-bedroom apartment was too small, he asked if they could live with me. "I don't mind. But are you comfortable with that, Nancy?" I inquired, though secretly thrilled at the thought of not being alone in this big house since Thomas passed away. "Nancy, are you okay with staying here?" For a moment, Nancy seemed a tad displeased, but it passed quickly. Soon she smiled and replied, "Of course. I've always dreamed of living in a house rather than an apartment." "See, Mom, Nancy agrees, so please, how could I refuse my dear James' request? Plus, I had my own worries about living alone. Having the young couple around would liven up the house and perhaps eventually bring grandchildren. I hoped this would gradually fill the void left by Thomas's absence. "It's okay, James. This is your home, and Nancy, please treat it as yours." I agreed to their arrangement. However, Nancy's occasional rude comments troubled me. Once we started living together, my suspicions were confirmed. "Linda, I'm quite busy, so could you handle all the meals and cleaning?" Nancy asked as we were still unpacking. "And the bath preparations too, please." Pretty please. She treated me like a maid, but I endured it for the sake of harmony with James and his wife. Yet the workload of running a household is vastly different for a single person than for a grown adult. "Linda, my lingerie is delicate, so be sure to hand wash it." Why can't she do it herself if she's so particular? Even I couldn't suppress my frustration. So I waited for an opportunity to talk to James when Nancy wasn't around. I had to bring it up abruptly, not wanting to upset him. "Hey James, could you maybe suggest to Nancy to share some of the housework?" When I broached the topic, "Nancy's never really done any housework, but she appreciates how meticulously you handle things, Mom," he replied. "Anyhow, I'll talk to her about it. Let's try to get along, okay?" James seemed to be attempting to reconcile Nancy and me. From that moment on, Nancy's attitude towards me deteriorated further. "Why isn't our room tidy? There's dust everywhere. Can't you clean your own space? There might be things we don't want touched." "What are you implying, Linda? You're such a homemaker, always at home, right? It's like you're mooching off James. Can you at least pitch in with the housework?" I muttered, feeling the weight of resentment building. If anyone's leeching off James, it's me. Nancy's the one draining the life out of this place. I'd endured everything because she was James' wife, taking care of them both, but I hit my breaking point. One day, my sister called. We were all grown, both my sister and brother married, with no one left at our parents' house. Dad passed away when I was in school, and Mom, who lived alone, also passed a few years ago. We didn't want to leave the house empty, so we put it up for sale, and we finally found a buyer. We needed to sort out our parents' house. If James and his wife hadn't come to stay with me, maybe I would have ended up alone too. But even so, if Nancy keeps this up, I won't be able to handle it. Maybe it's best to take a break. With James away on a business trip, I approached Nancy that night after she came out of the bath. "Can we talk?" I asked tentatively. "If it's something annoying, I don't want to hear it," she replied lazily. "I need to go back to my parents' house for a while. It might be for some time, so I need you to look after the house. And about the housework during that time, you're not expecting me to do it, are you?" She snapped in annoyance. "Seems like that's the plan. What do you think?" I prodded for her reaction. "This is your family home, right? You don't have to come back. I mean, it was nice that you did so much, but I hated living with some old lady who's practically a stranger. This is perfect." Nancy's rudeness, thinking James wasn't around, was blatant. "Sure, it's a bit old-fashioned, but this house is too big for just you, right? We'll make use of it, so don't worry. Maybe we should change the locks then. You can't get in even if you come back," she added casually. I was stunned. I tolerated her behavior because she was James's wife, taking care of them both, but I'd reached my limit. "Got it. I won't be coming back, so do as you please." "Really? Are you serious?" "Yay." I returned to my room, packing not just for this trip, but to make it easier for the movers. As the time arrived and I slipped an envelope into my trunk, I knew it was something I couldn't leave behind. The next morning, loaded with luggage and memories, I departed from the house. En route to my parents' home, I arranged for movers to transport my belongings. They would be stored temporarily until I secured a new place. Strolling down the familiar path, I spotted my parents' house in the distance. Though vacant, it appeared fairly well kept thanks to my nearby sister's regular upkeep. Together with my sister and brother, we reminisced while meticulously tidying every corner of the house. Maintaining an empty house proved challenging, hence selling it seemed the most practical. Retrieving the envelope from my trunk, I dialed the real estate agent's number inscribed on it. With the utilities of the house disconnected, we lodged at a nearby hotel during the cleanup. On the third day of tidying, I returned to my hotel room, eager for a shower. My phone buzzed incessantly, but I ignored it, immersed in the water. Yet the persistent calls drew my attention. Reviewing the call history, I noticed all the missed calls were from Nancy's phone. Glancing at the screen, yet another call from Nancy flashed. "Hey, what's up? Why the constant calls?" Despite knowing the reason, I intentionally adopted a particular tone. "So the movers whisked away all your stuff yesterday, but you're not seriously considering leaving for good, are you?" "What do you mean? Weren't you the one who said, 'Don't come back'?" Or have you conveniently forgotten? I retorted with a touch of mischief. You old hag, Linda. You're our maid, so come back right now. Being told to get out and then come back was rather self-serving. Sorry, but I'll pass. Perhaps boiling with rage, Nancy even referred to me as a maid. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm planning to rent out that house, and I've already contacted a real estate agent. So Nancy, you'll need to find a new place soon. What do you mean? We're living here. You can't just do that. Nancy's voice quivered, perhaps in bewilderment. I own that house. Like you said, it's too big for one person. I've been contemplating renting it out for some time to boost my income. Unless you and James want to become tenants, that's fine by me. You greedy old woman. Are you that desperate for money? Nancy seemed to have misunderstood, but I'm not strapped for cash. Fortunately, I have other properties. They generate income for me, so I'm financially secure. I just saw this as an opportunity to straighten things out. The envelope I brought from the house contained the deeds to my properties. Thomas had left them to me in case of emergencies. Initially belonging to Thomas's father, they were passed down to Thomas when his parents passed away. Thomas hadn't informed me about this, and I only discovered these assets through his will penned before his demise. I had intended to gradually reveal this to James over time, but Nancy's arrival as his wife completely deterred me. Then make arrangements for us to stay here. You're the landlord, right? Nancy's voice echoed with anguish. That's why I said if you two pay rent, there shouldn't be an issue, right? That's enough. I'll explain everything to James when he returns from his business trip. With that, she abruptly ended the call. I pondered what she might disclose to James. A few days later, James rang. Hi, Mom. You vacated the house, and now you're asking us to leave too. But isn't this our family home? I simply mentioned I had matters to attend to and requested you to house sit, but Nancy insisted I shouldn't return, and I couldn't bear it any longer. What? What are we supposed to do? I informed Nancy about my plan to rent out the place, so all you need to do is pay rent if that's feasible. Following my statement, James fell silent. Actually, I've recently changed jobs, James confessed straightforwardly. Since when? Just before our wedding. I haven't disclosed this to Nancy. I was taken aback. I had believed James was flourishing in his prestigious job, but he had been grappling with such issues. Generally, switching jobs is a significant life event. Shouldn't you inform your partner about your intentions to marry first? Why keep her in the dark? I was apprehensive, he admitted. He revealed that when they started dating, Nancy was pleased to hear he worked at a top company. With limited dating experience until his 30s, James lacked the courage to divulge the truth to the first person he considered marrying. I'm now working at a startup I established with some college buddies, and it seems we're on the brink of success. Mom, please lend me your support. James, devoid of siblings, sought my assistance. I wanted to offer my support, but James needed to take responsibility as an adult and a spouse. Life would only become more challenging if he didn't come clean and seek understanding from his partner. James, you're capable of sorting out your own affairs. Once you've done that, I'll assist as much as I can as your parent. Understand? After delivering that message, I ended the call, feeling a bit too stern. I resolved to have a conversation with both of them. A week after returning to my family home and completing the clearing out, I commended my sister and brother on their efforts. Well done. Let's plan to meet up again when we have more time, I suggested, intending to return home for the time being. Ah, Linda, welcome back. I've been expecting you, Nancy greeted me in a sugary tone as I arrived home. Notice you didn't change the locks. Change your mind. I retorted with a touch of sarcasm. Where's James? He's here, isn't he? James emerged from the back, looking visibly drained. Did you talk to Nancy properly? I inquired, to which Nancy appeared clueless. It seems you haven't told her, James admitted, disclosing that he had left his job to start a venture business with a friend. What? Is that all? I agreed to marry you because you were a promising employee at a top company. If not for that, I wouldn't have bothered with a gloomy guy like you, James. Nancy unexpectedly revealed her true feelings. So that's how Nancy truly feels. In that case, we have no choice but to end this. James sighed as he spoke. I thought we were getting along well with Mom. But Nancy, you were just using her as a replacement housekeeper. This old hag, she's only good for housework, right? What's wrong with that? Nancy crudely remarked. How could you speak to Mom like that? Can't you just leave? I don't even want to see your face anymore. I don't need this either. You deceived me, remember? I'll take legal action against you. With that, Nancy stormed out of the house. Are you sure this is the right decision? It's okay. Nancy never really cared for me from the beginning, James remarked. Yet his demeanor betrayed the bitterness of a man who felt betrayed. Subsequently, James and Nancy finalized their divorce. Nancy accused James of withholding information about his job change and sought alimony, alleging deception. However, it emerged that Nancy had quit her job and was engaging in secret rendezvous with a lover during the day. This led to a settlement where both parties shared the pain. I wanted some recompense for the verbal abuse and being treated like a maid, but I didn't want to stir up trouble, so I let it slide. I heard Nancy rushed back to her parents' house in tears, only to be scolded by them for her calculated marriage and divorce. They refused to let her return. Apparently, her parents were sensible folks. I also learned that Nancy had a strained relationship with them. In the end, Nancy, unwelcome at home, is scraping by, hopping from one part-time job to another. Maybe I just have a poor judgment of character, but I think I'm done with marriage. It's just too much hassle, James remarked, half in jest, half seriously. As planned, we rented out the original house, and James and I are now living separately. However, I found a suitable property among the inherited real estate, so we're using it as our respective residences. Some might call it extravagant, but I opted to sell off some of the properties and invest in James' business. I chose to believe in James's sincere plea to dedicate himself to his venture. Perhaps his marriage will have to wait until his business finds stability. As his mother, all I can do is hope he encounters the right person when the time is right.
It happened on the way to visit Mom's grave. Are you okay? It's hot. You must be tired. Vincent, Mom's remarried partner, asked me with concern in his voice. He was carrying flowers to place on the grave and was looking around for a spot where we could rest. No, it's not that I'm tired, I replied, glancing at Vincent as if urging him to keep moving. But suddenly, he hugged me. My face was pressed against his chest, and I could barely breathe. Panicked, I tried to pull away. Stop it. What are you doing? Standing in the middle of the road like this, anyone passing by would surely get the wrong idea. Vincent was supposed to be a serious man. So what was he thinking? Fear started to rise inside me, and just as I was about to scream, he whispered quietly enough that only I could hear. Keep still, don't move. Do you see those two people on the sidewalk across the street? I peeked over Vincent's shoulder, following his words, and glanced across the road. On the opposite sidewalk, I saw a face that was all too familiar, and it startled me. What? That's the woman's walk, her posture, her back, it was unmistakable. Next to her, a man walked alongside her, though I couldn't see his face. They didn't seem to notice us, and the two of them got into a cab, looking quite comfortable with each other. Why is she here? My emotions and thoughts raced, unable to keep up. My heart pounded, and my vision started to blur when I heard someone calling me. Get a hold of yourself. I snapped back to reality. At that moment, all I could remember was who was standing in front of me and where I was. My name is Megan. I left my job when I got married, and now I'm a housewife. My husband, Kevin, isn't a morning person and often sleeps right up until it's time to leave for work, so waking him up has become my daily routine. Even before we got married, when we were just living together, if I didn't wake him up, he would stay in bed forever. Let me sleep a bit more. I thought I had the day off. What are you talking about? It's Monday. After nearly 10 years of this, I realize how fast time has flown. We don't have any kids. Sometimes, when I see families with children, a small part of me aches. But Kevin and I talked about it, and we made our choice together. So I don't regret it. Now we live modestly but contentedly. After I finally get Kevin up and send him off to work, I go about my day doing the laundry, cleaning the house. Today is the day Mom is coming over. She raised me on her own, and we lived together until I got my first job. Dad passed away in an accident when I was still very young. Mom was always there for me, helping me with everything: school troubles, career choices, boyfriends. Because of that, we've grown incredibly close, to the point where she feels more like a best friend than just my mother. Even after I got married, nothing changed. We still find time to have lunch together or visit each other's homes. I glance at the clock, sensing that she'll arrive soon, and begin preparing coffee and some snacks. I bring out the financiers I bought, famous for pairing perfectly with coffee. But still, I wonder what this is about. I couldn't help but think about the message Mom sent me a few days ago. "I have something to talk to you about," she wrote, unusually formal for her. She normally doesn't phrase things like that. It seems like there might be something serious she wants to discuss today. Before long, the doorbell rings, and I instinctively know it's her. I open the front door. "Mom, come on in." I start to greet her, but freeze in place, stunned. Of course, it was Mom standing there, but next to her was a man I didn't know, with a kind expression. The man, who looked about the same age as Mom, greeted me with a hello. I had only prepared 2 coffee cups. This realization flashed through my mind in an instant, but I quickly gathered myself and invited them both inside. Hurrying to set out 3 cups, I sat down with them at the table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the living room. As I settled in to listen, I was shocked to hear that the man was Mom's boyfriend. "Sorry for the surprise. My name is Vincent. Alex has told me all about you, Megan." Alex is Mom's name. "Nice to meet you. I'm her daughter, Megan." I almost bit my tongue from the nervousness. This was the first time I learned that Mom was seeing someone. Still grappling with the concept of Mom's boyfriend, I stared at Vincent. His eyes reminded me of Dad's, and for some reason, that made me feel at ease. After talking about how they met and some of their hobbies, the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. Mom and Vincent were both looking at me. "Actually, Megan, I'm thinking about marrying Alex, and today I wanted to talk to you about that." The suddenness of it all left me speechless. I'm sorry for not saying anything until now, but I've been considering, well, remarrying. This was the first time I had ever heard Mom express such a thought. She had never dated anyone while raising me, devoting herself entirely to balancing work and taking care of the house. And I was so grateful to her for putting me through college while managing it all on her own. Of course, I had no reason to stop them from getting married. I'm surprised, but I'm happy for you. I don't think it's my place to stop your happiness. So you're okay with us being together? Of course. Please take care of Mom. Megan, thank you. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and I smiled at her. You always cry so easily. Whether it was when I entered high school, university, started my job, or got married, she always cried tears of joy for me. But this time was different. Finally, she was crying tears of happiness for herself. I wanted nothing more than for her to find her own happiness. A few days later, we had dinner together, Mom, Vincent, Kevin, and me. Vincent mentioned that he loved collecting leather goods, like book covers, wallets, and bags. Kevin, who also had an interest in leather accessories, hit it off with Vincent at the table. I retired at 65. I used to work as a government employee, Vincent said with a nostalgic smile. Looking at him, I couldn't help but feel like I was seeing a glimpse of Dad. It was a strange feeling. If Dad had been alive, would it have been like this? From that point on, Vincent not only cared deeply for Mom, but also for Kevin and me. Kind, almost overly sweet. He always made sure to check in on us. Because of him, we spent more time together as a family, growing closer over the months. However, it seems that after moments of joy, something bad often follows. A few months after Mom and Vincent's wedding, Kevin started coming home late more frequently, citing overtime. It's the busy season. There's nothing I can do about it, he said. He had been working at the same company for years, and never before had this time of year been especially busy. Really? Yeah, There's a new project starting, and there's just so much urgent work piling up. It's frustrating." With that, Kevin retreated to his room, his tone dismissive, almost like he was hiding something. I felt uneasy about the way he seemed to be covering something up. One humid evening, the news forecasted late-night rain. I waited for Kevin to come home. Even at 12 a.m., there was no sign of him. What's going on? Maybe he was waiting out the rain somewhere, but it didn't make sense that he hadn't responded to any of my messages. No matter how late, he always made it home in time for dinner. Calling the office wasn't an option, and either it was far too late, and no one would be there. I waited in the living room, and at some point, I drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, the sky outside was faintly light, and the clock showed 5 a.m. My neck and back ached from sitting in the chair all night. Had Kevin come home? Peeking at the front entrance, I saw Kevin's umbrella, soaking wet, left by the door. He had come home after all. If he came back, he could have woken me up, I thought to myself, though I still got up as usual to wake Kevin and send him off to work. From that day on, something about Kevin felt different. He started coming home later and later, and when he did, he wore a permanent scowl. He'd speak to me in grumbled, half-muttered phrases, brows furrowed. If I had done something wrong, I would have apologized, but nothing came to mind. This continued for a while until I finally worked up the courage to ask him directly, "Why are you so angry all the time?" Kevin sighed in frustration, as if my question annoyed him. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. You've looked upset for weeks. You've got it easy. You're a housewife. You just get to stay home all day. What? Deep down, you're looking down on me, aren't you?" I had no idea what he was talking about. Before I could respond, Kevin turned away and locked himself in his room. I was left confused and unable to make sense of the sudden change in him. It didn't feel like it was just about work stress. Even though I tried multiple times to talk things out with him, Kevin rejected every attempt. "Shut up. Just leave me alone. You wouldn't understand." His words felt like a slap, pushing me further away. Gradually, he started waking up on his own before I could go wake him, skipping breakfast and rushing out the door. I'd be left alone in the living room, staring at the untouched breakfast for two, feeling a deep sense of emptiness. Though he never physically hurt me, he would slam doors with force, throw objects in moments of frustration, and his sudden outbursts terrified me. I was living in fear of him, this man who no longer resembled the Kevin I knew. I couldn't bring myself to tell Mom or Vincent. I didn't want to worry them. So I endured it in silence, alone. Day after day, night after night, I found myself wishing that morning would never come. But the mornings did come, and with them, more days of silence, more tension between me and Kevin, more moments of being unable to recognize the man I had married. It was a cloudy afternoon, with the threat of rain hanging in the air. I was about to eat the last of the cookies from before when the doorbell rang. When I opened it, there stood Vincent, his face pale as a ghost, beads of sweat trickling down his forehead. Vincent and Mom's house was just a 10-minute walk away, but he seemed to have run all the way here. He was panting heavily, gripping a piece of paper tightly in his hand. I invited him in, made some coffee, and waited for him to calm down. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked when he seemed to catch his breath. Vincent, still shaken, began, "I know it's hard to believe, but..." He hesitated, then said, "Alex has disappeared." "What? Disappeared, gone missing, vanished without a trace? But why would Mom suddenly do something like that? That can't be true. Mom's not that kind of person." I shot back, unable to contain my disbelief. "There's no proof. How can you say something like that?" "Wait," Vincent said, holding up the crumpled piece of paper he had been clutching. "Here's the proof." He handed me the note. The paper was wrinkled and torn from how tightly he had been gripping it. It was a letter, written in Mom's handwriting. To Vincent, "I'm sorry for the suddenness, but I've decided to go on a journey." It read. As I continued to read, my hands started trembling uncontrollably. Half of the letter expressed gratitude toward Vincent and me, while the other half discussed financial matters and funeral arrangements in meticulous detail. Please don't try to find me. Take care of Megan for me. The letter ended with Mom's signature. What is this? This looks like a suicide note. Before I could finish my sentence, Vincent nodded slowly, as if understanding exactly what I was about to say. I know what you're thinking, but I don't want to believe it. I'm sure she's still out there, somewhere alive, he said, almost as if trying to convince himself. And besides, she didn't explain why she needed to leave. Why leave a note like this and not say why? He was right. Though it looked like a farewell note, there was nothing in it that explained why Mom would leave. Why would she just disappear like this? We have to find Mom, no matter what, I insisted. That very day, Vincent and I went to the police station and filed a missing person report. Maybe, just maybe, we could find her if we kept looking. With that small flicker of hope, we searched everywhere she might be. We visited the park, where we had many memories, and the supermarket Mom often went to. We spoke with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, leaving no stone unturned. We even put up missing person flyers, retracing our steps like something out of a crime drama. But no clues surfaced, and as reality sank in, all I felt was growing anxiety and frustration. One evening, the three of us, me, Kevin, and Vincent, sat around the dinner table in silence, as if the life had been sucked out of the room. It was Kevin who finally broke the quiet. "How long are you going to keep doing this?" he said, his voice laced with irritation. The letter said not to look for her, right? If that's what Alex wanted, maybe we shouldn't keep forcing it. What are you talking about? That's cruel. Haven't you looked enough? You haven't found anything. Maybe it's time to file a death certificate or something. I was speechless. It wasn't a certainty yet, but deep down, both Vincent and I had started to entertain that very possibility. Kevin's harsh words made us confront it head-on. We contacted the police again, but they had no updates, no new leads. After several discussions, we reluctantly decided to treat the day Mom disappeared as the day of her passing, and filed the death certificate. It was heartbreaking. I couldn't stop thinking about whether there was something I could have done before Mom disappeared. But no matter how much I agonized over it, she was gone. Once the paperwork was finalized, we arranged for a gravestone at a nearby cemetery, and it became our custom to visit every year. On the second anniversary of Mom's disappearance, Vincent and I were walking to the cemetery together. Kevin had left on a business trip the day before, so it was just the two of us. His cold, distant attitude hadn't changed. I found myself looking down as we walked, my feet heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. Seeing me like this, Vincent looked worried and asked, "Are you all right? It's hot today, you must be exhausted." He was holding the flowers we brought for the grave, glancing around for a place we could rest. Had I worried him too much? "No, it's not that I'm tired," I replied, trying to reassure him. I looked at Vincent, ready to urge him to keep walking, when suddenly, he hugged me tightly. "Stop it, hey." My face was pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. I panicked and tried to pull away, but his strong arms wouldn't release me. Vincent had always been serious and considerate, and more importantly, he was Mom's husband. He had never done anything like this before, and there was no reason for him to now. What if someone saw us? Anyone would misunderstand. What was he trying to do? Fear started to creep in, and I was about to scream when he whispered urgently, just for me to hear, "Stay still, don't move. Look across the street, on the sidewalk. Do you see those two people?" "What?" I cautiously peeked over Vincent's shoulder and looked where he directed me. The street wasn't busy, and across on the other sidewalk, I saw people walking. Among them, I noticed a familiar figure pass by. Mom. I followed the figure with my eyes. From the way she walked and her silhouette, I knew without a doubt that it was my mom. She was walking next to a man. The two of them stopped by a cab, got in, and then drove off. After watching the whole scene, Vincent finally let go and apologized. "Sorry for grabbing you like that. But was that Alex?" "Yes, that was definitely her," I confirmed, my voice shaking. I hadn't gotten a good look at the man's face before they got into the cab, but his build seemed vaguely familiar. Where had I seen him before? It was clear that neither of them had noticed us. Vincent and I found a nearby cafe, trying to piece together what had just happened. As we sat there, everything started to feel more confusing. On one hand, the realization that Mom was alive filled me with joy, and I wanted to run to her immediately. But on the other hand, the questions started piling up. Why hasn't she contacted me? Why had she disappeared without a word? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became, feeling as though I'd been betrayed. My emotions were all over the place, and I was on the verge of panic. As my heart raced and my vision blurred, I heard a voice calling my name. "Megan, get a hold of yourself." I snapped back to reality, struggling to remember who was in front of me and where I was. "Take a deep breath and calm down," Vincent said firmly but gently, locking eyes with me. I nodded, focusing on my breathing. Inhale, exhale until I felt steady again. Once I had regained my composure, I turned to Vincent. "I'm sorry for losing control like that. It's understandable. I feel the same. I want to run after Alex right now, but that man with her bothers me. He must have his reasons," I thought, agreeing with Vincent's observation. "Who do you think that man was? Why was he with Mom?" "I'm not sure. He looked too young to be just a friend, though." Vincent was right, he didn't seem to be anywhere near Mom's age. "Maybe we should talk to Kevin about this and consider hiring a private investigator." A private investigator. I hadn't considered that option before. After a moment's hesitation, I nodded in agreement. Yes, that might be the best approach. "Megan, I know this is shocking, but please hang in there. We have to handle this carefully." I could hear a slight tremor in Vincent's voice as well. We were both struggling to hide our emotions. That night, I told Kevin everything that had happened after he returned from his business trip. I explained how I had seen Mom walking down the street. Kevin, as usual, looked irritated, but I pressed on. "So the police have closed their investigation, but I think we should hire a private investigator next." Kevin, who had been half listening and responding with indifferent grunts, suddenly snapped. "A private investigator? That's a waste of time. You know, people say there are 3 people in the world who look just like you, right? It was probably just a look-alike." "It wasn't a look-alike. Vincent saw her too. Then it was a doppelganger." "Come on, Megan, the police couldn't find her. What makes you think a detective can?" No matter what I said, Kevin only grew more hostile, completely dismissing the idea of hiring an investigator. Why was he so against this? I couldn't understand his refusal. Hiring a private investigator seemed like a reasonable step if we wanted to know the truth about Mom. And yet, he was vehemently opposed. While looking at Kevin's profile, I suddenly recall a scene from earlier today. A silhouette and outfit that seemed somehow familiar. The sense of unease I felt back then was vague, but then, in a flash, it clicked. That realization gradually turned into certainty. Later, I met Vincent at the usual cafe to discuss it. I ordered the same coffee from before and drank it all at once. I had made up my mind. When I said I wanted to hire a private investigator to look into Kevin, I was opposed. But I need to know the truth. I'm going to request the investigation without telling him. "Huh, are you sure about that?" "I don't care. I'm past a point of worrying about methods." I was on the verge of grasping the truth behind the unease I had been feeling. Although I had turned my hunch into certainty, I couldn't be satisfied without solid evidence. "All right, I'll take care of arranging the investigator. Once the results come in, I'll contact you." We hugged and left the cafe together. Dark clouds hovered in the distance, and a wind that seemed to warn of impending rain blew past us. The atmosphere was heavy. A few weeks later, we met again at the cafe. Sitting next to our coffee cups were the materials compiled by the investigator. "This can't be. Even my small murmur seemed to dissolve into the cafe's air. Vincent and I were silent for a moment before he finally spoke. "Megan, I have an idea." Vincent's face was more serious than I had ever seen it, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a harsh expression as he explained his plan. After hearing it all, I nodded and agreed. A few days later, I told Kevin, "Hey, I've got a school reunion this Saturday, so I'll be out all day." "Got it. Be careful," he responded in a surprisingly cheerful tone and headed into his room. He didn't seem to notice the cold stare I directed at his back. As planned, I left early Saturday morning. Meeting up with Vincent, we followed Kevin from the place we agreed on. Whistling absent-mindedly, he made his way to an apartment building. He walked right into one of the units. After Kevin disappeared inside, we noted the room number and approached the door ourselves. Dressed in hats and tracksuits to pose as delivery personnel, we rang the doorbell. We heard the lock click, and the door opened. Standing in front of us was a familiar woman. There was no doubt it was my mother, Alex. "What, Megan and Vincent?" It was painful to see my mom's distressed expression, but Vincent swiftly pushed the door open and entered the room. I followed him, and there, as expected, was Kevin. "What? Why are you here?" "Megan, what happened to your reunion?" "That doesn't matter, not compared to this." As I said this, I slammed down the investigator's report. The scattered documents included pictures of the two walking together in town and leaving a hotel. Kevin's face turned pale, while my mom covered hers. "Yes, the two were having an affair." "Explain yourselves. When did you hire a private investigator?" "I told you not to." Kevin clicked his tongue, but when I glared at him sharply, they both resigned themselves and confessed everything. "I'm sorry, it's all my fault." Kevin isn't to blame. As it turns out, Mom was the first to develop feelings for him. After Vincent and I got married, there were more opportunities to have meals together, and they began talking and touching more. At some point, Mom fell for Kevin. However, she couldn't openly see him, much less live together with him. Knowing that she couldn't break apart my family weighed heavily on her mind. But then Kevin suggested, "If you disappear, we could meet whenever we wanted." "So it was my idea to disappear," Kevin admitted. "By faking her death, they believed they could meet freely without ruining our family." Of course, Mom had her own doubts. She knew it would hurt not just me, but also Vincent. She knew that. "Even so, you chose to disappear." When Vincent asked, Mom nodded. "Yes, I'm sorry. That letter you left behind, was that Kevin's idea too?" "Everything you wrote." Vincent's voice was calm but carried a weight of anger, his expression tense as he questioned her. Deep lines formed on his forehead. Mom began to answer, slowly. "No, I wrote it. Kevin told me not to, but I just couldn't leave without saying anything." She must have had her reasons for doing so, but even after hearing her explanation, Vincent and I still had questions. Where had Mom been after she left the house she shared with Vincent? Overseas. I left the U.S. for several months. I arranged the plane tickets and the accommodation. It's all true. No wonder the police couldn't find her. The police had assumed there was no foul play and didn't conduct a full investigation. But with her being abroad, there was no way she could have been found. We had searched countless shops and places full of memories, asked people, all in vain. That's why you said, "How long are we going to keep doing this?" Back then, Kevin knew that Mom was alive and out of the country, and he had grown frustrated with being dragged into what he considered a pointless search. Perhaps because I hit the mark. Kevin fell silent, lowering his gaze. "How could you? You're both so selfish." "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Please, forgive me." After explaining everything, Mom broke down in tears, repeatedly apologizing to me and Vincent, over and over again. Yet, despite all that, she still said she wanted to be with Kevin. That statement shocked me, but no one was more surprised than Vincent. "Why? Was I not enough for you? He pressed, demanding an explanation for why she would choose Kevin over him. It was understandable. They had married later in life, had just begun living together. And now this. I'm sorry, I love him. He's kind, cheerful, and always so confident. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke, but from my perspective, that's just a facade. How could a man who would have an affair with my mom be kind? At home, he always locked himself in his room, and I had never seen the cheerful, confident Kevin she was describing. And besides, I don't have much time left. What do you mean? I have cancer. They told me I don't have long to live. Mom explained that she had refused all treatment, planning to accept her fate when the time came. That was why the letter she left had read like a farewell note. My whole life, I lived for Megan. I never did anything truly feminine. I knew how much she had struggled throughout her life. Thinking of this, I urged her to continue, but at the very end, her voice cracked, unable to finish the sentence. At the very end, I wanted to live how I wanted to. As she said this, crying, Mom seemed so small. I understand how you feel, Mom, but I can't forgive you for choosing Kevin over me, over Vincent. You want to spend your last days with him. I made my stance clear. I knew from the investigator's report that her body had been ravaged by cancer. But so what? No matter the circumstances or how little time she had left, there are still lines you don't cross. What do you have to say for yourself, Mom? She struggled to find an answer as I pressed her. Then I turned to Kevin. Earlier, he had been pale, observing the situation, but now the color had returned to his face. Perhaps he felt relieved that no one had questioned him directly, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I have something to ask you as well. I picked up one of the scattered papers on the table, a photograph. It wasn't a picture of me or Mom, but of Kevin walking closely with an unfamiliar woman. The photo showed Kevin and a young woman walking arm in arm, smiling intimately. He had never shown me that kind of affection. Mom stared at the photo, shocked, clearly not recognizing the woman either. Kevin moved his lips as if he wanted to say something, but perhaps deciding it was useless. He cleared his throat and started speaking. Her name is Brock. She works at a nightclub I frequent. Yes, of course, we're dating. He said it proudly, leaving Mom speechless. As for me, I was beyond shocked, just completely fed up. When I first saw the investigator's report, I couldn't believe it, but now it all made sense. Kevin had been carrying on an affair with Mom while also frequenting nightclubs and seeing Brock, and the most absurd part was that he kept living with me all the while. I really wanted to ask how he managed his time for all that. How could you do this while being married? I glared at him, trying to hold back my rage. But Kevin, as if resigned to the situation, let out a mocking laugh. Married? Give me a break. What did you just say? I've had enough of living with you. You'd always come to wake me up in the morning, acting like the perfect wife. He glared back at me with disdain. I kept telling you that your little act made me feel like a fool, but you never noticed. Now that I thought about it, he had said something like that before, so that's what he meant back then. But if I didn't wake you up, you'd complain about that too, saying, "What's the point of living together, then?" Shut up, I never said that. And don't misunderstand, my relationship with Alex wasn't serious either. How could he say that after helping her fake her disappearance? It was about the inheritance. I figured if I stayed with her, I'd get a bigger cut once she passed. Inheritance. It was convenient. Once I got her inheritance, I'd have money to live with Brock. He kept talking as if it was no big deal, but I couldn't ignore what he just said. Live with Brock? Yeah. The only person I actually care about is Brock. I'm sure she feels the same. We're meant for each other, not you or Alex. This man, choosing some other woman over both his wife and his mistress, was truly despicable. As I stared at him coldly, I couldn't help but think how vile and rotten he was. Not only was he hurting me, but he was also hurting Mom without a second thought. Then go ahead and call Brooke, I said. Why? Come on, If she loves you as much as you say, she'll pick up, right? I pressed him, saying I had something to discuss with her directly. Sensing something, Kevin clicked his tongue in frustration and dialed Brooke's number. But no matter how long he waited, she didn't answer. What? Hold on. Why isn't she picking up? Growing more irritated with each failed attempt, Kevin became visibly agitated. What the hell? She's not answering. Did you do something? Maybe, I said, folding my arms and recalling what had happened a few days earlier. After learning about Brooke's workplace from the investigator's report, I had gone to see her. The look on her face when I showed up, her eyes practically popped out of her head. When I told her I was Kevin's wife, she simply said, "I can't believe it." Apparently, Kevin had lied to Brooke, telling her he was single. Not only that, but Brooke herself only saw Kevin as a regular customer and had no idea they were dating. She told me she didn't want to get involved in any trouble and, right in front of me, deleted Kevin's contact information. She apologized sincerely and promised never to have anything to do with him again. I had been worried about what might happen if she got confrontational, but in the end, I decided to forgive her. After I finished telling this story, Kevin collapsed onto his knees. Mutual love. Really? What part of that was mutual? But we went shopping together so many times, he muttered, his face growing pale once again. I never imagined I'd see Kevin look this pitiful. The confident attitude he'd shown just moments earlier had completely vanished, leaving him an empty shell after all his lies were exposed. Feeling utterly exasperated, I handed him a sheet of paper. It's over. Our relationship is finished. Let's get a divorce. I spoke firmly and sharply, though this was still being kind to him. Kevin, with a stunned expression, weakly took the paper from me. Okay, sign it. Right now, I demanded. Then I turned to face Mom. She, too, was staring at Kevin with a pale face, trembling. She couldn't believe what she was seeing, nor could she believe what she had just heard. She had probably wanted to avoid breaking up her daughter's family, but now here she was, watching it fall apart in front of her eyes. Perhaps she regretted her actions, even just a little. Mom's large tears began to flow. Vincent, who should have been the one supporting her, stood by with a sorrowful expression, not moving to comfort her. He looked as though he was still wondering whether they could repair their relationship or if it was truly beyond saving. Hey, Mom. I locked eyes with her tear-streaked, red face. When you disappeared back then, it was really hard for me. I blamed myself, thinking I couldn't help you. I continued, recalling the events from 2 years ago. And even when I found you later, I felt angry, wondering why you didn't reach out to me if you were okay. But the truth had been far worse than I could have imagined. Megan, I can't forgive you easily, Mom. Though I spoke with resolve, I couldn't stop the tears from falling. I wasn't sure if I was sad or angry, but the emotions were overwhelming. But at the same time, I know that you gave up the best years of your life as a woman for my sake. That's also true. And I can't help but feel responsible for that, too. That's not true. Mom, please don't choose a man like that. You might not have much time left, but I want to spend your final days together as a family. You might not have much time left, but I want to spend your final days together as a family. As I spoke my honest feelings, Mom nodded through her tears, and then she broke down crying. Vincent, determined to stay with her, gently held her shoulders, standing by her side. Supported by both me and Vincent, Mom was able to come home with us. For the next few months, I did everything I could to repay her. I took her on trips and treated her to her favorite meals. When her body started to give out, Vincent devoted himself to taking care of her, doing all the small things around her. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Mom seemed comforted by his kindness. She chose to spend her remaining days at home, in the house she shared with Vincent. And as the autumn drew to a close, Mom passed away quietly, with me and Vincent by her side. She was 65. Mom had finally finished her life's journey. Standing before her grave, I whispered, "Mom, you kept apologizing to us, right up until the end." Vincent, beside me, said nothing, only nodding silently. None of us could have predicted such a heartbreaking farewell. The wrinkles etched into his brow seemed to tell the story. By this time, my divorce from Kevin had been finalized. Naturally, I had filed for financial compensation in the divorce proceedings, and Kevin was required to pay me a monthly sum. It wasn't a lump sum, though, because Kevin didn't have any savings. He had spent so much money spoiling Brooke, and even went as far as secretly borrowing money behind my back. Luxury handbags, accessories, the list went on and on. Between repaying those debts and paying me alimony, I heard that his financial situation had become quite difficult. Still unsatisfied, I contacted Kevin's former coworkers and told them about his behavior. I told them how irresponsible he was with women, juggling 3 relationships at once, which ultimately led to our divorce. The coworkers were shocked and spread the news throughout the company, so Kevin's actions became common knowledge. No matter how much he tried to explain, everyone saw it as just excuses, and no one took him seriously. Eventually, he became isolated at work, and his boss pressured him to resign voluntarily. In the end, he even lost his job. As for me, I decided to start a new job. It had been decades since I had worked, so I felt nervous and unsure of myself. But Vincent introduced me to a job opportunity. A friend of mine started a store, and business is going well, so they're looking to hire more staff. It was a specialty leather goods shop, with most of its sales done online. There was a lot to learn, but starting something new was exciting, and each day felt fresh and stimulating. The staff there were a diverse group. Some were mothers whose children had grown, and others were simply passionate about leather goods. As I continued working, I started talking more often with a particular man. He had a hobby of collecting leather wallets and had become a fan of our store after discovering it. He was also a coffee enthusiast, and his favorite treat was the famed cookies, which were said to pair perfectly with coffee. At first, I would simply nod along, but once the conversation turned to coffee and cookies, I found myself joining in. That became the spark that brought us closer. We began meeting outside of work, and before long, we started dating. I was reminded of the coffee from that cafe I had visited before. Its rich aroma and slight acidity created a perfect balance. "I know a great cafe. Would you like to check it out?" When I asked him, he smiled and nodded. That smile made my heart flutter. A new chapter of my life was beginning, and with it, a new love.
My name is Emily. I'm a 32-year-old stay-at-home mom. My husband, Benjamin, is 34 and works a regular office job. We have a beautiful little girl, Mia, in our 8 years of marriage. Our 6-year-old daughter is so cute, she has both of us wrapped around her finger. I have an older sister, Lily, who is 3 years my senior. Recently turned 35, she got divorced due to personality clashes and is now a single mom. Her son, Logan, is just 4 years old, still so young. One day, we had planned a trip to the zoo, just the 4 of us. Unfortunately, I caught a cold and had to stay in bed. Benjamin decided to take the day off from work and go to the zoo anyway. He didn't want to disappoint the kids. Even though they were with the children, it was just my husband and sister alone. Even if they're in-laws, who could have imagined something would happen between a brother and sister? Fast forward to another day. I was walking down the shopping street on my way home from the grocery store when I saw Benjamin and Lily in a cafe by chance. I was puzzled as to why they were together. But I had to pick up Mia from after-school care soon, so I headed home without giving it much thought. When Benjamin got home that night, he told me nonchalantly. We ran into each other and then it started to rain. We just popped into the cafe to take shelter from the rain. So, I believed him. However, from that day forward, He started coming home late more often. He started asking for more pocket money because he said it wasn't enough. He also started going out more on his days off. When Lily came over, their relationship seemed more intimate than before. A string of suspicious events. I couldn't believe it. But I still trusted him. Benjamin still adored our daughter as much as ever, and we still had a good relationship. However, it seems that I was the only one who thought everything was fine. Then, an incident happened that made me realize this. One day, as usual, Lily came over to our house. A friend invited me on a trip. Would you mind taking care of Logan for about a week? A whole week? It's the Bahamas, and it would be tough with Logan. But, please, I haven't been able to take a break recently. I'll bring back souvenirs, so please. She begged persistently. Indeed, I thought Lily had a tough time since her divorce. My parents and I had been helping her out, but raising a child alone is undoubtedly hard. So I reluctantly agreed. As the day of Lily's Bahamas trip approached, I'll be out of town for a few days on a business trip, said Benjamin. He said he would be traveling to several regions, so it would take a few days. I thought it would be tough, but when I heard the departure date, I was surprised. It was the same day as Lily's trip to the Bahamas. Was this just a coincidence? Was it just a coincidence that my sister's trip and my husband's business trip were on the same day? Was it a coincidence that Benjamin was spending more time looking at his smartphone? Was it just my imagination that he seemed to be acting sneakily and trying to hide his phone from me? Was it my imagination that when Lily came to the house, they casually touched hands and were standing closer together? Everything started to seem suspicious. Then came the day of Lily's trip. Early in the morning, Lily came over with Logan. The moment I took Logan's hand, I noticed something was off. His hand was abnormally hot. When I picked him up, his body was also hot. I didn't need a thermometer to know he had a high fever. Lily, doesn't Logan have a fever? Yeah, he's had a fever since yesterday. It hasn't gone down yet. We can't delay, we have to get him to a hospital quickly. Of course, my son Logan's health comes before a trip. But then, my sister said something outrageous. Then, I'll leave it up to you. What? That's what I'm saying. I'm leaving Logan to you. You can't possibly be leaving behind a child with a fever, can you? I have no choice. We've had this trip planned for a while. It's ridiculous to pay a cancellation fee. It's not about the money, right? Isn't Logan's well-being important? Of course, he's important. But since you're here, Emily, I'm not worried. Please take good care of him. Wait, don't go, sis. Despite my pleas, she left. I couldn't believe it. Logan was suffering with a high fever, and yet his condition worsened from the stress of moving around. So I quickly tucked him into bed and placed a cold, damp towel on his forehead. While preparing an ice pillow in the freezer, my husband woke up. Honey, it seems like Logan has a fever. Really? My sister's awful. She left Logan like this to go on a trip. It can't be helped. They've had this trip planned for a long time, and it's too late to cancel now. You too, dear? Poor Logan. If you're so concerned, then you should take care of him. Honey, can you do something about your business trip? If Logan has a contagious disease, he might pass it on to Mia. I'll take care of Logan, and I need you to take care of Mia. I thought my husband, who adores our daughter, would reluctantly agree. His job is important, but surely our daughter is even more so. But my hope was dashed. What? That's impossible. If you're worried, why not leave her with your parents? That won't work. Our parents are busy with their jobs. And your parents live too far away to drop her off at this hour. Then it can't be helped. Logan will be fine if we let him rest. Don't worry. Please don't be so casual about this. What do you want me to do? I can't change my plans. Oh, it's time. I have to go now. Bye. With that, he hurriedly left. Left alone, I immediately called my parents. They couldn't take time off from their sudden work commitments. But they agreed to leave work early and pick up Mia as soon as possible. I felt relieved when my mom said that. Until my mom arrives, I'll have to keep Mia locked in her room. I feel sorry for her, but it can't be helped. Meanwhile, Logan's condition seemed to be worsening. He started coughing in addition to the fever. In the afternoon, my mom, who left work early, arrived. I handed Mia over to her and headed straight to the pediatric clinic with Logan. In the car, the motion seemed to make Logan uncomfortable, which was hard to see. The doctor said it was just a common cold and prescribed a fever reducer. He asked us to observe Logan and call an ambulance if his fever went up or if he seemed delirious. I'm sorry, Mom, for suddenly leaving Mia with you. Don't worry about it. More importantly, I'm concerned about Logan. To my parents, Logan is as precious as Mia. On the other end of the line, I could hear my mother's worried voice. After hanging up with my mom, I decided to call my husband's office. I wanted to find out where he was staying on his business trip, just in case. The reply I received was, "I should be on paid vacation." I sighed, lifting my voice towards the heavens as if making a plea. A dreaded suspicion was beginning to solidify. I opened my husband's laptop. I had never looked through it before, but a quick scan of his search history revealed his destination: the Bahamas. Both flight tickets and hotel bookings were arranged by him. I recognized the hotel's name. It was the same place my sister had mentioned. My sister and husband in the Bahamas at the same time, staying in the same hotel. Such a coincidence seemed next to impossible. The mere fact that my husband was in the Bahamas, taking paid leave while claiming to be on a business trip, was an alarming situation. Curious, I looked at my smartphone. I was checking my sister's social media posts. There were no new posts. But looking at her recent posts, although not clearly visible, I could tell she was frequently with someone. The glimpse of clothing I could catch were all too familiar. What changed my suspicion into certainty was a photo where the wristwatch of the man she was with was visible. It was the watch I had given my husband. Although not expensive, it was from a minor manufacturer, hence the unique design. The odds that another man, dressed like my husband, wearing the same watch would appear in my sister's photos seemed infinitesimally small. And then, I found the conclusive piece of evidence. A photo titled "Window Shopping" had my sister's reflection on the glass. On the edge of that photo, also reflected on the glass, was another person. Undeniably, it was my husband. My blissfully ignorant sister must have posted the picture without noticing her husband's reflection in the glass. My hands trembling, I saved all the pictures. There was no mistake about it. My sister and husband were having an affair. Right now, they were together. I felt everything I had built up with my husband crumbling down all at once. I tried calling them numerous times, but soon a voicemail message started playing. It seemed they had turned off their phones. Logan's fever still hadn't broken. Seeing his distressed face, anger started to rise within me. Despite our young child suffering, despite me being in such a difficult situation, right now, my sister and husband were probably laughing, enjoying their vacation in the Bahamas. Could there be a worse story? I was trembling with anger. I wondered what to do, but that could wait. First, I needed Logan to recover. But Logan's fever showed no signs of abating. In fact, it seemed to be increasing. I was shocked when I took his temperature. 107 degrees Fahrenheit. Children tend to run high fevers. Mia had experienced a 104 degrees Fahrenheit fever before, but never this high. Why isn't the fever reducer working? Logan was completely drained. It looked painful for him to even move. What should I do? I fought hard to suppress the panic that was threatening to overtake me. I need to call an ambulance. It was at that moment, with my smartphone clutched in my hand. Mom. Logan murmured in a small voice. His face contorted in pain. He called for his aunt. Unforgivable. I will never forgive them. As my vision seemed to turn red with anger. Logan's condition took a sudden turn for the worse. A week has passed since then. Contrary to my feelings of sorrow, today was a clear day. Staring blankly at the vast blue sky, tears began to spill over. I had lost count of how many times I had cried. Yet, the tears wouldn't stop. I could feel Mia's hand trembling in my own. The daughter was crying, too. As I lifted her up, I could see my parents weeping uncontrollably over her trembling, small shoulders. And the others in attendance. Everyone, absolutely everyone, was in tears. Suddenly, my smartphone vibrated. I put Mia down and saw my sister's name on the screen. Hello? Emily? Long time no see. I just got back from the Bahamas. I've just landed at the airport. I'm off to pick up Logan. Thanks for looking after him. It felt like a phone call from another world. I muttered to myself. He's gone to heaven. A tear that should have stopped fell. What? My sister on the other end of the phone didn't seem to understand what I had said. She responded with a clueless question. Heaven? What are you talking about? I don't understand. That's what I'm saying. He went to heaven while you were on your trip to the Bahamas. I don't understand what you're saying. You'll understand when you get here. The funeral is over, and we're at the crematorium. Crematorium? When I told my confused sister the location of the crematorium, she abruptly hung up the phone. Logan! Logan! My sister, just out of the taxi, dramatically changed her expression and started running. She called his name and looked around, but Logan was nowhere to be found. Where is he? He's not here. Of course he's not. What do you mean? I slowly pointed in one direction. Towards the crematorium. The crematorium doesn't emit smoke like it used to, but it's true that he is being cremated right now. Logan, that day, the day you dropped off Logan, his fever shot up to 107 degrees Fahrenheit all at once. 107 degrees Fahrenheit! The antipyretic we got from the pediatrician had no effect, and his condition worsened rapidly. We had to call an ambulance in a panic. So, that means Logan is... I don't want to answer that. We're in the middle of a funeral. Saying that, I spread my arms wide, pointing at the crematorium. Hey, what does this mean? What happened to Logan? Why are you here? Someone shouted in place of my speechless sister. It was my husband. Unbelievable, my husband had come here with my sister. What does that matter right now? What about Logan? Of course it matters. Not losing to my husband's voice, I shouted back. How can you two just abandon your family and go on a secret love trip? Moreover, Logan had a fever, and even when I said I needed help, you ignored me and went on your trip. Are you out of your mind? What are you talking about? I already know. When I asked your company, they said you had taken paid leave. I checked your computer and found a booking for a trip to the Bahamas. You were on the same flight and stayed at the same hotel as my sister. You think you can just claim it's a coincidence? I must have had a terrifying look on my face. My husband lost his words under my intimidating stare. Tell me, Emily. Did Logan, did he die? Do you have the luxury to ask such a question now? What do you think we're doing here? Why do you think I'm in a simple, modest dress standing at a crematorium? Don't you get it? No! 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 My sister's scream dominated the scene. As my sister broke down crying, I looked down at her with cold eyes. You have no right to cry. You abandoned your son to go on a secret trip with my husband. You're the worst kind of person. I was lonely. I was so lonely all by myself. So I just what? Reached out to your sister's husband. What do you mean? I've done nothing wrong. It's not my fault. The real villain here is my ex-husband who refused to take our son, and it's not just him. It's also the fault of our parents who never helped me with the child, and Emily too. My sister reacted angrily, not taking responsibility. I didn't choose to have a child, and I didn't choose to be a single mother. I wanted him to take our son if we were going to get divorced, but he refused. I've been struggling alone because of that, but I didn't. I couldn't. Logan, oh Logan. Lily. It was her lover, my husband, who comforted her as she collapsed into tears. It seemed they were no longer interested in hiding their affair. Don't blame everyone else for your problems. Our parents and I have helped as much as we could. You can't justify leaving a sick child to go on a tryst. Not realizing how rotten you are, you're the worst. Hey, Emily, isn't that a bit harsh? Lily just lost Logan. She's in shock. Shut up, accomplice. I'm divorcing you, so be ready to pay what you owe. What? What does that have to do with anything? It has everything to do with it. My husband and I argued, while my sister cried. It was a chaotic situation. Our parents approached. My tear-streaked sister started blaming them. Dad, Mom. Logan is. Why didn't you take care of Logan properly? Why did you let Logan? Suddenly, there was a loud slap. Enough with your nonsense. It was my father who slapped my sister's face. Don't blame others when you were the one who abandoned your child. But. And having an affair with your sister's husband? You shameless woman. I'm ashamed to have raised you like this. My sister cried even louder at our father's words. I wanted to punch my husband, too. I was glaring at him when... Mommy. I heard a little boy's voice. My sister quickly turned around. There. What? Logan? A man was holding Logan. Logan? Logan! My sister ran towards them, but the man quickly moved Logan out of her reach. Hey! What are you doing, Andrew? The man holding Logan was Andrew, my sister's ex-husband. He was the one who divorced my sister due to irreconcilable differences. What are you doing, leaving Logan like that? He's my son, not yours. He's my son too. I complied with the public opinion that it's better for a mother to have custody, even though you insisted on not giving me parental rights. But you wouldn't let me see him no matter how many times I asked, and my worry proved justified. You're not fit to be Logan's mother. Just shut up. You should just pay the child support. I'd pay any amount for Logan. But you left him without care. You don't even know how critical his condition was, and you're out on your affair trip. That day, when Logan's condition deteriorated, I panicked and called an ambulance. When we got to the hospital and while he was being treated, I called our parents and Andrew, Logan's father. He was surprised when I told him my sister was on a trip with my husband. After that, Logan, who was discharged from the hospital in good health, was resting at Andrew's and his parents' house. Wait a minute, you're saying Logan's okay? Then whose? My husband asked, puzzled, staring at the crematorium. I replied, it's our grandmother. Our grandmother, mother to me and my sister, and great-grandmother to Mia and Logan, was in her advanced years and bedridden, living in a nursing facility. She passed away from old age just recently. Despite being bedridden, our grandma was quite lucid and doted on her great-grandchildren Mia and Logan. Whenever we visited her at the nursing home, she would light up with joy. Her sudden departure left us, my parents, and Mia in deep sorrow, unable to do anything but grieve. Logan, who had been ill, couldn't attend the funeral. However, since he'd called my sister to the crematorium, Andrew was there. His fever had subsided, and he looked well. You tricked us. No one said Logan had died. My sister accused us with her eyes, but it was we who had the right to accuse. I didn't hear about Grandma's death either. She snapped back. I tried calling both of you several times to tell you about Grandma's passing, but the line was always busy. Considering how kind she was to you, it's unfathomable that you're this late. Enough! You're all making fools of us. Logan, let's go home. You don't want to stay with such a man. You want to be with Mom, right? Andrew, give Logan back right now. Will you ever stop? The one who scolded my sister, who was bearing down on Andrew, was our father. Do you still think you can keep Logan with you after all of this? What you've done could have gotten you in legal trouble for child abandonment. You've proven to be an unfit mother. Never think you'll be allowed near Logan again. Logan will be raised by Andrew. Dad, how could you? We've decided to fully support Andrew and hire a lawyer. You are no longer our daughter. We're cutting ties with you. Mom! My sister's face went pale at the harsh words of her own parents. I stood in front of her with a firm stance. I'm divorcing my husband, so why don't the two of you stick together? You should be fine not seeing your children anymore. You were able to go on an overseas trip and leave them behind after all. Upon hearing this, my husband burst out. Emily, wait! It was just a lapse in judgment. Lily and I were just fooling around. The ones who matter to me are you and Mia. Then my sister also started shouting. What do you mean fooling around? You told me you no longer loved Emily and that I was the only one you loved. Stop! Stop the noise! I just love my daughter. Don't mess with me. And so, the storm had reignited between my husband and my sister. Leaving the squabbling pair behind, we departed from the scene with my grandmother's ashes. After that, we had a lot of disagreements, but having appointed a lawyer, I managed to settle everything. Logan went to live with his dad. I thought he might feel sad being away from his mother, but he was rather pleased. Which meant my sister wasn't functioning at all as a mother. My husband and I had our disputes. Well, more accurately, my husband was obstinate, but after being scolded by both my parents and his, he was feeling down. Then our daughter landed the knockout punch. I don't need daddy. She might be only 6 years old, but girls mature quickly. She must have understood her father's despicable actions in her own way. When our daughter looked at my husband like he was a bug, I couldn't help but laugh. For my husband, who adored his daughter, no, my ex-husband, there could be no greater punishment. He was allowed to see his daughter, but whether she wanted to see him was up to her. And so, the storm came to an end. Mia and I returned to my parents' home and are living peacefully. My parents are thrilled to live with Mia. She's starting elementary school next year, so we're excited about the preparations. I plan to find a job when she starts school. Logan comes by every now and then with Andrew. He looks totally different, his face is brighter, and he's always smiling. Meanwhile, my sister and my ex-husband seem to have ended their relationship quite easily. I guess it was really just a fling for my ex-husband. Perhaps upset about being disliked by his daughter, he dumped my sister without hesitation. However, his despicable affair with his wife's sister became known at his company, which questioned his character, and he was relocated to a remote area. That will make it even more difficult for him to see his daughter. Serves him right. As for my sister, after being abandoned by everyone, she seemed to live like an empty shell for a while. Then she disappeared. We've filed a missing persons report, but I have a feeling we'll never find my sister. That's just the feeling I get.
You're so useless. I can't believe I'm stuck with an ugly wife like you. I wish I could get a divorce tomorrow. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Drunk or not, how could anyone say something so cruel? I felt myself shaking with anger. You're too drunk. Apologize to Sharon. That's right. You can't just throw around the word divorce like it's nothing. My in-laws tried to rein Andrew in, but he wasn't having any of it. Instead, he doubled down, almost as if their concern just spurred him to insult me more. Yeah, whatever. She's the one who'll be struggling after a divorce, not me. I'm the one who wants out. The way he spoke, it was beyond cruel. I felt something inside me snap. I put on my brightest smile, looked right at Andrew, and said, "Oh, perfect. Let's get divorced then." Andrew seemed to shrink back, stunned by my sudden comeback. But this wasn't something I could let slide anymore. As our family started murmuring around us, I spoke again, ready to shatter Andrew's pride. My name is Sharon. I'm a 30-year-old mom. Our son, Mark, is 3 years old and goes to daycare. He's going through what they call the terrible threes, which can be challenging, but he's still so lovable. My husband, Andrew, who is Mark's dad, is 5 years older than me. He's 35. Right now, he works at a big corporate firm, and we live happily as a family of 3 in a small apartment. But getting here wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of times when I regretted marrying Andrew. 5 years ago, Andrew and I started dating. We were together for 2 years before I got pregnant, and that's when we got married. We had already promised to marry each other, though it was just a verbal promise, and both our parents got along well. So, there was no real issue with the pregnancy. But the trouble started after we were married. I was on maternity leave, home alone, when it all went down. The doorbell rang, and when I answered, there was a woman standing there. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying for hours. I was taken aback. "Are you okay? What happened?" I asked. But she just glared at me and yelled, "Give me back Drew." Excuse me. I don't get it. What's going on? If anyone didn't get it, it was me. Some stranger shows up at my door, yelling and sobbing. "Drew." I repeated her words, and then it hit me. "Do you mean Andrew, my husband, Andrew?" "Yes. Who else would I be talking about? What's your relationship with Andrew? And, who are you exactly?" I asked her carefully, feeling a pit in my stomach. The woman let out a sharp huff, wiped her tears, and with an air of superiority, she answered, "I'm Rachel. I'm Drew's girlfriend. We were about to celebrate our 1-year anniversary, but then you got pregnant, and he suddenly broke up with me. I was speechless. Rachel, as she introduced herself, broke down again, crying even harder. The shock I felt was overwhelming, but I could also feel her pain. It hurt me, too. Eventually, Rachel left, tears streaming down her face. She didn't try to harm me or anything. She just wanted to tell me the truth. She must have known that telling me wouldn't change anything. Yet there she was, helpless, just like me. Still, the fact that Andrew had deceived me for a whole year, how could I believe that, given how he normally acted? I hoped it was some kind of mistake. But that night, when I confronted him, Andrew confessed. "I'm really sorry." She confessed her feelings to me, and I turned her down. But then she started crying. I felt so bad for her, so I kept meeting with her. Just met up with her. But she called herself your girlfriend. Well, yay, I won't deny it. It was that kind of relationship. Hearing those words come directly from Andrew felt like a punch to the gut. Seeing my face fall, Andrew scrambled. "But you're the one I love. You're the real deal, Sharon. And now we have a kid. We're married. It's all over with her, I promise." "That's not the point." I broke down and cried. Andrew looked genuinely shocked by how upset I was, and all he could do was apologize over and over. Even though I knew it was over, I couldn't shake the worry that maybe he was still deceiving me, or the doubt about whether I could ever truly stay with him after this. "I'm really sorry. From now on, I swear I'll never make you feel like this again. I'll be there for you and our baby. I promise." Hearing him repeat that over and over, I finally calmed down. After all, we were just newly married, and I was carrying our baby. If I told my parents I wanted a divorce over something in the past, I'd only make them worry. Plus, deep down, I still had feelings for Andrew. I didn't really want a divorce. "Fine, but you can't betray me again. There's no next time." Of course. Andrew's voice was strong and determined. I decided to believe in that serious look in his eyes, just one more time, and sealed this incident away in my heart. A little while later, our beautiful baby boy was born. We named him Mark. The doctors said he was one of the healthiest babies they'd ever seen, and I was learning the ropes of being a mom. Overwhelmed, but happy. But when Mark was about 2 months old, Andrew came home looking angry and irritable. "What's wrong?" "I quit my job." "What? You quit?" "Yeah, I got into a fight with my boss." Andrew wouldn't even look at me. I pressed him for more. Over something like that. "Mark was just born. What were you thinking?" "So what? Tomorrow, you're going to be unemployed. What are we going to do? How many times are you going to quit your jobs?" I was so consumed with anxiety that I couldn't even try to understand how Andrew was feeling. I just yelled. We didn't have much in savings. And actually, this wasn't the first time Andrew had left a job. The first time was before we started dating. He had gotten a job at a mid-sized but reputable company in town. But he said he had to leave because his boss kept harassing him. When we met, he had just switched to another job. The second time was while we were dating. He took a part-time job at a supermarket, but said it didn't suit him, so he changed jobs again. The third time was after we got married. He wanted more flexibility in his shifts, so he took a full-time position as an office clerk at a care facility. But he quit that one, too. I didn't think job hopping was necessarily a bad thing. People fit or don't fit with certain jobs. Andrew was proof of that. Still, quitting jobs this easily, it just had to be Andrew's fault. Andrew, however, did not like the way I put it, and turned his anger toward me. "Whether I quit or change jobs 1,000 times, it's none of your business. It's my life." That may be true, but you've got a child to support now. You're an adult, a parent. Quitting over an argument with your boss. So what? I'm supposed to sacrifice my life for Mark? If that's how you feel, why don't you just raise Mark on your own? That comment hit a nerve. It's not like that's what I meant at all. But clearly, Andrew couldn't see my point of view. Both of us fell silent. That was the start of our Cold War. A month passed, and our conversations were kept to a bare minimum. Andrew seemed to be out looking for a job every day, but nothing was panning out. I knew we couldn't survive like this much longer, so I started looking for a daycare center for Mark, who was barely 4 months old. Thankfully, I was able to find one quickly, and I contacted my company to discuss coming back to work. After explaining my situation, they graciously offered, "Would you like to try working remotely?" My direct supervisor was a man, but he had 2 kids of his own. "Are you sure it's okay?" "Yay, your child is still young, and it must be tough. And if you're feeling unwell, working remotely means you can still manage, maybe even step out to take him to the doctor if needed. It's a way to keep your job without overdoing it, and it's not a disadvantage to the company either." I was deeply moved and grateful that they let me work remotely. He made it sound so easy, but there had never been a precedent for this. He must have gone to bat for me with upper management, and they said my pay wouldn't be much different from before. It would be challenging, of course, but it was a huge advantage for me. On top of that, I was genuinely touched by my boss's kindness, and it made me determined to push through no matter how hard it got. Truthfully, I still wanted to spend more time with Mark, but sometimes sacrifices have to be made. To keep our lives going, I had no choice but to work. So when Mark was 4.5 months old, he started going to daycare. I felt a pang in my chest seeing him, the tiniest one there. But since Mark hadn't started showing any signs of separation anxiety, he went to daycare without crying. During that time, Andrew still couldn't find a job. He probably went to the job center every morning and spent his days there. He'd return in the evening, but even if I was still working, he wouldn't help with the housework. The Cold War continued, and we barely spoke to each other. But about a month after I returned to work, light finally started to return to our household. I got a job. For the first time in a while, Andrew excitedly shared the news. Honestly, it didn't matter where. I just wanted him to take his work seriously. Contrary to my modest expectations, Andrew was thrilled about his new job. It was at a big-name company. "That's amazing." I was genuinely surprised. Seeing my reaction, Andrew looked smugly satisfied. "In any case, be sure to put up with the little things this time. Don't quit over something small." "Of course not. Besides, it's a major company. It won't be like before, with unreasonable bosses and unfair treatment." I knew working at a large company didn't necessarily mean things would be fair, but hitting him with that kind of logic wouldn't help. It would only crush his motivation. So I smiled and celebrated Andrew's fresh start. 2 years passed. Mark turned 2, and he was becoming quite the talker. I was still working remotely. Contrary to my earlier worries, Andrew didn't quit this time. He worked hard. By now, he seemed comfortable in his role, but he was very busy. Even when Mark would try to talk to him, calling, "Dad, Dad," Andrew would say, "I've got work messages," or "Dad's busy," never putting his smartphone down. I wished he'd at least look at Mark's face, talk to him, or play a bit, but I wanted Andrew to focus on work first, so I said nothing and just watched over him. Then Christmas came around. Every year since our marriage, we spent Christmas at my in-laws' house. Andrew is an only child, but his father William is the oldest of 3 siblings, so Andrew's Uncle Eric, Aunt Mary, and their cousins all gather for the party. It's something William looks forward to every year. This year was no different, and the party kicked off. Andrew, who now worked at a major company, was immediately cornered by Mary's son, Kevin, who was about to start his job hunt. He asked Andrew for advice. Well, in my case, I had the accomplishments from my previous job to fall back on. Andrew said this proudly, but all he'd accomplished was quitting after a fight. Listening closely, I realized that he'd told our family and relatives that his past job changes were because he'd been headhunted by other companies. I couldn't help but feel a bit exasperated. But unlike me, everyone else praised him, and Andrew just kept going. "Mark is adorable. My job's going great. It's really been worth all the hard work. Andrew, you're really something. Yay, now if only my wife were a bit prettier, things would be perfect. He wasn't speaking directly to me, but those words made me freeze. What? Come on, aren't you just head over heels for Sharon? Kevin tried to play off Andrew's comment as a joke, trying to defuse the situation, but Andrew just laughed it off, as if she's a useless, ugly woman. I wish I could get a divorce already. I couldn't believe it. Even if he was drunk, how could those words come out of his mouth? My whole body shook with anger. Hey, ugly, don't just stand there. Bring me another drink. This one's empty. Realizing I'd heard the conversation, Andrew decided to taunt me further. You're way too drunk. Apologize to Sharon. Yay, you shouldn't just throw around talk about divorce like it's nothing. My in-laws tried to get through to Andrew, but he wasn't listening. Instead, as if to spite them, he kept belittling me even more. Doesn't matter. She's the one who'll have a problem if we divorce. I want out. That was it. My anger finally exploded. I gave a big smile. Well then, let's get a divorce. My voice came out louder than I expected, and suddenly, the entire room froze. What? Andrew, shocked by my unexpected words, faltered, then tried to laugh it off. Haha, come on, it's a joke. You don't have to take it so seriously. A joke? If you joke like that, I can't stay with you. But Andrew, who had been belittling me this whole time, shrank back in the face of my sudden comeback. But this wasn't something I could let slide as a joke anymore. As the family began to whisper among themselves, I spoke up again. By the way, I've been listening to you giving advice to Kevin, acting like you're some big shot. Who do you think you are? What? Kevin tilted his head, confused. The advice Andrew was giving, instead of being genuinely helpful, was just him boasting, with no real regard for Kevin's situation. I mean, you're just a temp worker making a net income of $1, $3K, and you're talking like you're a full-time employee. What? A temp worker? When I said this, Kevin loudly repeated my words. A temp, net income of $1, $3K. Eric and Mary immediately started pressing Andrew for answers. Andrew's face turned bright red as he glared at me, but I acted like I didn't notice. Then William spoke up. What is this about? Are you really working as a temp, making a net income of $1, $3K? Well, Andrew straightened up, the tone of William's voice obviously unsettling him. William was kind to me, but was essentially a strict and serious man. Someone quite the opposite of Andrew. Andrew had once told me that if William ever got angry, he was impossible to handle. Clearly, Andrew was terrified. I never checked if you were a full-time employee, but didn't you say you were recruited to work at your current company? William's questioning, with that stern tone, continued. Andrew remained silent, and Eric chimed in. Andrew, is what Sharon said true? Well, you see, Sharon, what's going on? Unable to hold back any longer, Jasmine turned to me. Now everyone in the room was looking at me. Andrew, who had gone from bright red to a pale blue, shook his head desperately. Don't say anything, keep quiet. He was practically mouthing the words, but Andrew had already crossed a line he shouldn't have. Ignoring his pleading eyes, I continued. It's just as I said. Sure, Andrew works at that company, but he's only there as a temp. He just happened to find the position through a staffing agency. But what about the headhunting? Headhunting? Of course not. He left his previous job after fighting with his boss, and then just signed up with a temp agency. The truth left everyone in stunned silence. Only Jasmine, her voice shaking, asked me another question. Wait, so were all the job changes like that? Yes. He would leave jobs over not getting along with the company, or because of supposed harassment. Seems like he has no perseverance, and quits easily. Was it a lie then, that you were headhunted? William's face was now bright red as he turned to Andrew, shouting. Andrew cowered, unable to respond. No, he couldn't respond. He had been deceiving his parents all along. and now both of them were being humiliated in front of the entire family. And because of that, his salary has not gone up. Just as I said, it's currently a net income of $1. $3K. $1. $3K. Come on. Kevin couldn't hold back a laugh. Mary, his mother, tried to tell him to be quiet, but even she was half laughing. But, Sharon, aren't you unemployed? How are you making ends meet? Jasmine, still pale, asked me. I was surprised by this. Me? Unemployed? Aren't you? Andrew told us that. He said it's hard having to support you both. Andrew. What is the meaning of this? It turned out Andrew had lied about me not working, just to maintain his own pride. That also explained why he'd belittled me and brought up divorce earlier. He wanted to make himself look like the breadwinner in front of the family. Someone important, someone to be respected. Andrew sat there, trembling and staring down. I looked around the room, at Jasmine and everyone else, and said, I had to go back to work when Mark was only 4 months old because Andrew quit his job. I work full-time, remotely from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And Mark has been going to daycare since he was 4 months old. Wasn't that for educational purposes? Educational purposes. Daycare centers only accept kids when both parents are working. Jasmine was speechless. She had told me more than once. There's no need to send such a young child to daycare. I had always dodged the question, but now the reason was clear. Jasmine hadn't known the requirements for daycare or the fact that I was working. I see. I had no idea, and it's all because of Andrew. I'm so sorry, Sharon. As she spoke, Jasmine broke down in tears. Jasmine had always been a housewife and was a bit naive. It made sense that she wouldn't know much about daycare, and I knew she hadn't meant any harm. Seeing Jasmine cry so openly, even Andrew seemed shocked and pained. That was the final straw, and William's anger reached its peak. You lied to your parents, burdened Sharon and Mark, and then had the nerve to speak that way to Sharon, who has been supporting you. What on earth are you thinking? Dad, calm down. Don't call me Dad. I'm done with you. I'm cutting you off. I don't need someone who would make Jasmine cry. Get out. Andrew froze in his tracks at William's shouting, then quickly shrank back and stood up. He walked over to me as if to make an escape, and muttered, Let's go. To be honest, I didn't want to go home with Andrew, but there was no reason for me to stay there either. I picked up Mark and stood, giving a quick bow. A house that had been so lively during the party was now completely silent, except for the sound of Jasmine quietly sobbing. I left that quiet in-laws house behind. I drove us back home. Andrew sat in the passenger seat, sulking the whole way. After arriving home, I put a sleeping Mark to bed, then returned to the living room, where Andrew was waiting for me, ready to speak. Why did you have to ruin everything by saying that? I ignored him, which seemed to make him even angrier, his voice rising. Hey, are you listening to me? Can't you take a joke? What, is your brain as ugly as your face? I glared at Andrew. But getting into a fight now would make all the effort I'd put in so far go to waste. I took a deep breath and pulled out something I'd been holding onto. Here, I placed an envelope on the coffee table in front of the sofa where Andrew was sitting. Is that divorce papers? I told you, it was just a joke. Andrew looked bewildered for a second. Just open it. Andrew reluctantly reached for the envelope as I told him to. I watched him slowly pull out its contents and examine them. The moment he saw the paper inside, his face went rigid, and I didn't miss that reaction. What the hell is this? It's the summary of your infidelity investigation. You seem to know exactly why I'd have something like this, don't you? I know. I kept my tone authoritative, and Andrew's voice faltered. The paper in Andrew's hand contained the overview of an investigation into his cheating, which I had hired a private investigator to conduct. I understood that his work kept him busy, but even so, Andrew spent an unusually long time on his smartphone. I had a suspicion that he was cheating on me. However, I had my own job to take care of, so I couldn't keep track of Andrew's behavior. That's why I hired a private investigator. The actual results are in here. Want to take a look? The paper Andrew held was just the contract summary. I pulled out another envelope and held it in front of Andrew. Of course, I already knew what was inside, but Andrew didn't know what details or photos were in the report. Still, his expression and body language made it obvious that he was aware of and acknowledged the results without even seeing them. What's that supposed to mean? Me cheating? That's ridiculous. His words sounded confident, but there was no way to lie his way out of this. I already had the evidence in my hands. I'd received the report a while back. It was infuriating, but I was too busy with work and preparing for the Christmas gathering. I planned to wait until the new year to calmly discuss things, so I held it all in. But after Andrew belittled me, humiliated me, and only cared about himself, I reached my breaking point. Divorcing him was already a decision I'd made in my heart. So when he brought up divorce today, I just went along with it. I don't know why you're trying to spin this, but we're getting a divorce. Hey, come on, let's be reasonable. Oh, I am being reasonable. I've been thinking calmly about this for weeks now. You think about it too. Why would anyone want to stay married to a husband who cheats and belittles the wife who supports him in front of their whole family? Andrew fell silent, then started to sniffle. Was he trying to cry to get sympathy? If anything, it only made me feel more disgusted. Oh, and by the way, I already got those divorce papers you said you wanted earlier. I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Yay, it is. If you know that, then hurry up and sign them. I shoved the divorce papers into Andrew's hands. I had even prepared a pen for him, yet he made no move to take it. After waiting a bit, and seeing that Andrew was just crying and begging for my forgiveness, I decided to force him to make up his mind by showing him the results of the cheating investigation. You don't have to show me. I know I'm wrong. But Andrew refused to look. Just look at it. I yelled at Andrew, forcing him to face the evidence. As he read through the report, his face turned pale. He was so shocked that his tears stopped. What is this? The words came out of him like a desperate whisper. I had figured as much, but Andrew clearly hadn't known. I wanted him to absorb the information not just through his eyes, but through his ears as well, so I spoke up again. That woman, Rachel, right? The one you were seeing before we got married. She's pregnant, isn't she? She's pregnant. Just as I expected, Andrew started to tremble. One of the photos he held showed Rachel entering a maternity clinic. The private investigator I hired had one of their staff pretend to be pregnant and approach Rachel. Apparently, Rachel had readily admitted to being pregnant, and the whole exchange was documented in the report. I told you before, there wouldn't be a next time, and I wouldn't forgive you. Yet you didn't cut ties with her, did you? I know. I don't want to hear excuses like before. The fact is, she's pregnant. I don't want Mark to have a half-sibling, so just disappear from our lives. Actually, Mark and I will be the ones to leave. Andrew had nothing more to say. Of course not. There was nothing he could say. After that, I contacted the investigator and got a referral for a lawyer. I filed for both damages and child support from Andrew, and for damages from Rachel. Andrew cried and apologized over and over, begging me not to leave, but I didn't listen to a word. Rachel quickly paid the damages. She probably wanted to marry Andrew as soon as possible. I was grateful she'd taken out the trash for me. Eventually, Andrew realized that divorce was his only option, so he borrowed money from his parents to pay the compensation. He said he would pay child support from his small salary going forward. As soon as I confirmed the funds had been transferred, I filed the divorce papers. I had no more attachments to Andrew since everything I needed had been settled. Andrew, on the other hand, seemed full of regrets, but that didn't matter to me. I left the house to start a new life with Mark, happy to be free. My in-laws even visited my parents, who lived far away, to personally apologize for Andrew's disgraceful behavior. I never had any negative feelings toward my in-laws. They had lent Andrew the money to pay the damages and talked to him about freeing me through divorce. If anything, I was grateful for their support. If anything ever happens with Mark, we'll always be here to help. I didn't want anything to do with Andrew anymore, but those words meant a lot to me. Mark and I started our new lives in a new home. But then, 6 months after the divorce, Andrew contacted me out of nowhere. "Sharon, I'm really sorry. I want another chance. Let's start over." Life had finally settled down, and just hearing his voice filled me with disgust. Honestly, that call was nothing but a nuisance. "I'm standing in front of your house right now. I want to see Mark's face. Just for a moment. Please let me come in." I figured he must have asked my in-laws for my new address. Though I was hesitant about Andrew's request, he had been paying child support, so I reluctantly agreed. "But I'm not letting you in the house. You can see him at the door." "That's fine." Andrew quickly accepted my terms. 3 minutes after hanging up the phone, the doorbell rang. "Who is it?" Mark asked innocently, but I couldn't bring myself to say it was his father. "Stay here, Mark. A friend of Mom's is at the door. You can wave to him from here." Okay. I didn't want Mark and Andrew to get too close, so I decided to let Mark see Andrew from behind the door leading to the living room. Then I went to the door alone. "Sharon." It had been a while since we'd seen each other, and Andrew's eyes welled up with tears as he looked at me. "Mark is over there. Take a look, and then leave." "Mark, he's gotten so big in just 6 months." Andrew whispered happily to himself. He was the one who broke everything, yet he spoke as if he were the victim. Looking at Mark's face, Andrew seemed to make up his mind about something and turned to me. "Like I said before, don't you think we could start over? Don't be ridiculous. You have Rachel and your child now, remember?" At my words, Andrew's expression darkened. "Actually," and he started to explain. "Apparently, after our divorce, he did marry Rachel, but Rachel didn't do any housework, and she wasn't holding down a stable job. She worked part-time, but she got into a fight with her coworkers and quit. Can you believe that? And now she's in her last trimester, so nobody will hire her." He spoke as if he had no part in it, not even realizing that he was just like Rachel. "We don't have any money, so paying child support for Mark is tough. We can't live like this. So I thought, what if I just leave Rachel and come back to you? I could pay child support for Rachel's baby instead, and we'd all be happier." I was dumbfounded. He probably thought that if we lived off my salary, he could use his income to support Rachel's child. How could he think that such a proposal would make anyone happy? Besides, Rachel had always liked Andrew. I don't know how they got back together, but she was clearly obsessed with him. No matter how poor they were, I doubted Rachel would want to let go of Andrew. And why should I support Andrew while he pays child support for someone else's child? I hated Andrew, so there was no way we could be happy together. "See, even Mark has been looking at me this whole time." Andrew said this joyfully, watching Mark glance over at us from the living room. "Sorry, but both Mark and I would be miserable if we were with you. I'm not interested in getting back together. But think about Mark. He needs a father in his life." Andrew spoke with intensity, then called out toward the living room. "Hey, Mark, come here." Mark, responding to the voice, opened the door. Mark, seeing him smile, pained me a bit. This was Andrew's fault, but because of him, our child lost his father. Mark, still smiling, asked me innocently, "Mom, who's that man?" "What?" I was stunned by the question. "What?" Andrew, at the same moment, echoed my surprise. "Who are you?" But Mark, with his pure smile, asked Andrew again. I couldn't help but laugh. In the 6 months they hadn't seen each other, Andrew's presence had vanished from Mark's mind. But I knew it wasn't just about time. Even when he was still around, Andrew never truly connected with Mark. He ignored Mark when he'd try to talk in his broken, simple sentences, always glued to his smartphone. It was no wonder Mark didn't recognize his face. "It looks like Mark doesn't need you." "No way. Mark. It's Dad." "Dad, I don't have a dad. I only need Mom." Andrew staggered and caught himself against the wall. I struggled to hold back my laughter. So that's that? We'll be happy on our own. Andrew probably never thought even his own child would reject him. He sighed quietly several times, holding his head in his hands. His tightly pressed lips and regretful posture spoke volumes about his remorse. Forgotten by Mark, and rejected once more by me, Andrew finally seemed to accept that there was no place for him here, and he left without a word. A month later, I got a call from Jasmine. Although we kept in touch, Jasmine and I weren't the kind of friends who would chat without a reason. So when I answered the call, wondering what it could be, Jasmine spoke in a serious tone. Sharon, I don't know how to say this, but I need some advice. Advice? What's wrong? Andrew's baby was just born, right? Well, he's type O, but the baby's blood type is AB. Andrew's not very good at science, so he doesn't seem to realize it, but that means the baby isn't biologically his, right? I held back my laughter. It seemed Jasmine had no one else to turn to, so she came to me for advice, but there was nothing I could say. And it looks like Andrew's temp job won't be renewed. I just don't know what to do. William says to just leave him. Jasmine, I really don't think you need to worry about this. Andrew is an adult. He'll figure it out. I managed to respond while suppressing my laughter. Jasmine's cluelessness allowed me to find out what was going on, and I felt a surprising sense of satisfaction. Serves him right. I never would have guessed that Rachel's child wasn't Andrew's. But then again, even his own child, Mark, had forgotten him. He chose to claim the child as his own, so no matter whose baby it really was, I hoped he would raise it well. As for me, I continued moving forward, raising Mark on my own. Work was going smoothly. My efforts with remote work were recognized, and the company decided to create a dedicated remote work group for mothers returning from maternity leave and those with caregiving responsibilities. I was appointed as the leader of this remote work group. My pay increased, and I was finally able to start saving money. We're even planning a trip with the compensation I received from Andrew and Rachel. My parents were worried about me right after the divorce, but now they're relieved to see me happy and doing well. I'm not someone who would let this kind of thing break me. With Mark by my side, I know I can handle anything. That's how I feel.
Actually, the bride can't have children, and I've always been against the marriage. But my son insisted, so I had no choice. In the middle of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law, standing on the stage to deliver her speech, blurted out something shocking. She boldly declared my infertility in front of all the attendees. Well, as you can see, the bride is a barren failure. But she's a career woman, and she earns well, so I reluctantly accepted the marriage. I was left speechless by her audacity. How could she label a woman who can't have children a failure and shame her in front of everyone? In the middle of the wedding reception, the mother-in-law, standing on the stage to deliver her speech, blurted out something shocking. The wedding hall fell silent at the unexpected insult from the mother-in-law. My name is Catherine. I'm a 31-year-old office worker at a well-known company. I belong to the glamorous department of product development, where I'm responsible for planning new products. I've been involved in several hit products so far, and I find my job very fulfilling. Though I'm content with my work and happy, I have a secret I can't tell anyone. That is, I'm infertile. I found out 5 years ago that I can't have children. I remember feeling shocked and devastated at the time. I felt worthless, and I lost hope for the future. In fact, the boyfriend I was dating at the time ended up breaking up with me. Being overwhelmed by sadness and frustration, the only thing that could uplift me was my job. I worked hard so I wouldn't have time to dwell on unnecessary thoughts. Looking back, I think I was avoiding reality. But thanks to my hard work, a product I was deeply involved in became a big hit, and my evaluation at work improved. Since I couldn't have children, I thought I had no choice but to give up on marriage. I was convinced that contributing to society through work was the only path I had in life. But then, an unexpected encounter came my way. At a meeting for product development, I met a man my age from a client company. This man changed my fate. His name is David. He's the son of the president of the client company, and he's the head of the planning department. David and I exchanged contact information right away. Initially, we only communicated for work, but gradually our private exchanges increased. Eventually, we started dating, and it turned into a relationship. I thought I could never fall in love again, so meeting him felt like a miracle. David is a very kind and devoted man. And to such a man, I couldn't bring myself to reveal my secret. If David found out that I was infertile, he would surely leave me. I was scared at the thought. But I couldn't keep secrets from David, who treated me with sincerity. I didn't know what would happen, but I decided to be honest about my body. I made up my mind and told David that I was infertile. He'll leave me. I thought it was possible. Despite being resolved, I was anxious. But when I gathered the courage to talk, he started to cry after hearing it. He comforted me saying, "It must have been tough. Thank you for telling me." His kindness made me cry, and I remember it like it was yesterday. In the end, the breakup I feared did not come, and my relationship with David continued smoothly from that day. On our second anniversary, David celebrated at a restaurant. He opened a small case in front of me, revealing a ring, and then he spoke. "Catherine, I want you to marry me." It was an unexpected proposal. My heart pounded with joy. But I also felt a wave of anxiety. "David, are you sure about me? I can't have a baby. We can't have our own child. Are you still okay with that?" Even though David understands my situation, the weight of marriage is something different. I couldn't immediately say yes to his proposal. "Yeah, it doesn't matter. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Catherine. Even when things get tough, even when we're sad, I want us to live through it all together." David reassured me, taking my anxiety into account. At that moment, I might have shed a lifetime's worth of tears. Since the day I was diagnosed as infertile, I had never dreamt that this day would come. I knew then that I could face anything as long as I was with him. I accepted his proposal, certain of my feelings. "I want to live my life with you too, David. Thank you for always caring for me. I look forward to our future together." And so, we quickly began preparations for our wedding. I was already past 30. I was eager to become a wife, to officially join our lives together as soon as possible. It's funny how much you want to rush things once a proposal is on the table. Now that marriage was becoming a reality, I felt it all the more. But before anything else, we had to meet David's parents. We had met them a few times before, but we hadn't really had a proper conversation. We set a date to meet and tell them about our engagement. But the news of our marriage did not go smoothly. While his father was very happy, his mother kept a stern face throughout. And then, "Catherine, I can't accept that you're going to marry David." She expressed her opposition to our marriage. "Why?" Before I could speak, David questioned his mother. As she continued to glare at me, she explained her reason. "You can't have children, right? That means we won't have any grandchildren, doesn't it? Our only son David can't have a child. Is there anything worse?" She brought up the very thing I didn't want to be confronted with. I was prepared to face blame for being infertile, but hearing it said outright really hurt. Her words left me without a reply. "You understand, right? David is set to become the next president of the company. It's only natural that we expect his wife to produce an heir. Marrying someone who can't do that. I won't allow it." She continued to deny our marriage in a forceful tone. I was fully aware that David was the future head of the company, and I understood that his parents would want him to have a child soon. But David proposed to me, knowing all this. Not being able to have a child with David is painful for me too. Even though we chose to get married knowing all of this, her words were too harsh. "I'm the one who said it didn't matter." David jumped in, defending me against his mother. "Stop blaming Catherine. Don't trample over our decisions like this." David spoke up for me when I was lost for words. His dad was also angry at his mom, saying, "How can you say such a thing?" But no matter what anyone said, his mother remained unmoved, her expression unchanged. "I'm not saying anything wrong," she declared, before leaving the table, indicating she had no more to discuss. In the end, our conversation that day didn't lead to any resolution. Still, it didn't change our firm decision to get married. We took the plunge and registered our marriage, with his father's approval. We knew if we waited for her approval, we might never get married. "It doesn't matter if my mom is against it," David reassured me. "I'm the one who wanted to get married. Let's just wait for her to eventually give in." And so, David and I became husband and wife. Yet, even after that, his mother refused to acknowledge our marriage. "I will never accept this. I won't even attend the wedding," she said, pushing it even further. Because of this, we decided to put off the wedding ceremony. We still hoped to have her acceptance before we celebrated our union. Day after day, his father tried to persuade her, and both David and I continued to appeal to her, pouring our hearts into every plea. But she remained stubborn and refused to give in. Eventually, even my parents visited his parents' house several times to try and talk her down. Even some of David's relatives suggested she accept our marriage. Finally, after all these earnest appeals from everyone around her, she relented. At last, we could proceed with the wedding ceremony. She still seemed discontented, but David and I began our preparations, and finally set a date for our wedding. It was a year from the day we registered our marriage, essentially, our first wedding anniversary. When our wedding day was finally set, David and I felt relieved. And before we knew it, the day of our wedding arrived. I was deeply touched, filled with joy that we were finally celebrating this day. I was finally able to wear the wedding dress that I had almost given up on. It felt like a dream come true. The wedding ceremony went smoothly at the church, and the reception began. Surrounded by the blessings of many attendees, I was overflowing with happiness. I owe it all to David, who stood by my side and led me here, even when I was feeling defeated and thought I wasn't worthy of marriage. I couldn't thank him enough. Seeing David, all dressed up and looking so gallant and dependable, made me so happy. As the reception proceeded and we were about to retreat for a costume change, I noticed his mother taking the stage. It looked like she had asked the MC for permission to say a few words to the attendees. And so, she started her speech on her own. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate my son's wedding today. The truth is, the bride can't have children, and I've been against their marriage all along." I was about to leave my seat to change, but her words made me freeze on the spot. She had just mentioned something that shouldn't be said, especially not here at our joyful wedding celebration. The lively atmosphere in the venue quickly hushed to a silence. "But my son was insistent, so I gave in and accepted their marriage." In the dead silent hall, mother-in-law's voice was the only one echoing. Frozen in place, I watched as David tried to approach mother-in-law and snatch the microphone. "Mom, can you stop this?" But David's attempts were smoothly evaded by mother-in-law, who wouldn't be stopped. Holding onto the microphone tightly so as not to lose it, she continued to address the attendees. "You see, I will never be able to hold a grandchild in my life. Can you believe such a dreadful story? Really, I don't understand why he chose a woman like this." I was flabbergasted by the barrage of harsh words. Beside me, David was struggling to contain his anger towards his mother's unhinged outburst. Then, mother-in-law dropped the bombshell. "Well, as you can see, my daughter-in-law is a barren failure. But she's quite the career woman and makes good money. So, I begrudgingly accepted their marriage." Mother-in-law chuckled loudly at her own words. She then looked at me and added one final jab. "You should be grateful. It's thanks to me that you're having this day." With that, mother-in-law, appearing pleased, returned to her seat, having finished her utterly disgraceful speech. Had there ever been a more offensive speech? I was too stunned to even hear the voices around me. Urged by David and the venue staff, I was led out of the hall with my mind a blur. Once inside the dressing room, all the suppressed emotions came crashing in. Anger, sadness, the sense of loss from having our anticipated ceremony ruined. I was overwhelmed by my distaste for everything. I never wanted to see mother-in-law's face again. I didn't want to return to a venue where such a person was present. As I was changing out of my current dress for the next one, I refused to put on the next dress and changed into my own clothes instead. "I've had enough. I'm going home," I told David and ran out of the dressing room, towards the entrance of the venue. "Catherine, wait a minute." Ignoring David's attempts to stop me, I jumped into a taxi that was parked at the entrance. I asked the driver to take me home. Having been humiliated by mother-in-law in front of everyone at the reception, I couldn't contain my anger. I wanted to escape from there as quickly as possible. Our new home, where David and I had just started living, was a short 5-minute drive from the wedding venue. Upon entering our home, the tears I had been holding back flowed freely. I never dreamed that I would be treated so cruelly in front of a crowd on my wedding day. My happiness from yesterday had instantly turned into the worst despair. It's not like I chose to be infertile. And to expose that in front of so many people. Especially on a day like this. Thoughts were racing through my head. While I was wiping away my tears, David arrived. "Catherine, I'm truly sorry. Please, forgive me. I never imagined my mother would say such horrible things. I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything for you." David bowed deeply to me, offering words of apology. He explained that as the groom, he couldn't afford to raise his voice against his mother's antics. I knew very well that David was a decent person. And besides, mother-in-law was the one at fault here. I didn't feel like blaming him at all. "Please, Catherine, let's go back to the wedding. I told my dad to keep my mom out of the venue. They're in the middle of a dress change and it's a mingling time for the guests. We can still make it back in time. I don't want our reception to end in shambles like this. Please, let's go back together." I nodded at David's plea. I decided to trust him and return to the wedding. I didn't want to cause any more pain for him, my supporter and my understanding companion. Moreover, I was reluctant to ruin the reception we had both painstakingly prepared for. Apologizing to David for rushing back home in a huff, we made our way back to the venue. In the taxi, we held hands, promising to see our wedding reception through to the end. Once we returned and entered the family waiting room, we found my mother-in-law surrounded by relatives. It was clear from her exhausted expression that she had been heavily reprimanded. Seeing my face, mother-in-law approached me. "Oh, Catherine, I'm so sorry. Can we just pretend that earlier incident never happened?" She lowered her head slightly towards me. pleading for forgiveness in a childish voice. It was a complete turnaround from the smug face she had displayed at the reception. "What? How could you even suggest that, after the humiliation you caused in front of so many people? How can you say let's just forget it all happened?" My anger resurfaced at mother-in-law's insolent behavior. The audacity of asking for forgiveness after what she had done was beyond my comprehension. Why was she seeking forgiveness in the first place when she didn't even want to accept me? She could have just left things as they were if she disliked it so much. I expressed my unwillingness to forgive her to mother-in-law and started preparing to get back to the ceremony. "Don't be like that. I'm apologizing, so won't you forgive me? I had no idea that one of your relatives was a key client of our company. My maternal uncle, as it turns out, runs a significant client of my father-in-law's company. Apparently, while I was away, he had given mother-in-law a serious dressing down. He had even hinted at stopping the business transaction. Thanks to my father-in-law's desperate apologies, the situation was barely kept under control. I immediately understood why mother-in-law was apologizing. It wasn't out of guilt or regret towards me, but for her own self-preservation. I was so astounded that I was lost for words. It was then that David, who had been silently watching our exchange, finally spoke up. "Mom, is that your idea of an apology? Aren't you disrespecting Catherine too much? And you're apologizing to her just because you were scolded by a client?" Mother-in-law looked blankly at David, who had raised his voice suddenly. It was rare for him to lose his temper like this, as he was typically calm and collected. It was understandable that mother-in-law was taken aback. "Do you even understand how much you hurt Catherine, Mom? You made light of her most sensitive issue in front of everyone at our wedding. As a person, that's the worst thing you could do. No matter the reason, it's unforgivable to casually bring up someone's health issues like that." David didn't hold back, continuing to shout at mother-in-law. He let out all the pent-up feelings he had towards his own mother. He had witnessed firsthand how mother-in-law had hurt me time and time again, using my infertility as a weapon. The worst of it all was her outrageous behavior at today's reception. David's gaze upon his mother was filled with disdain. "I'm done with you. Consider yourself without a son. If you can't accept Catherine as my wife, that's your problem. What you say doesn't affect us. Our family-in-law doesn't concern outsiders." A complete disavowal. David finally laid it out for his mother-in-law. He declared he had no intention of associating with her from here on out. As far as he was concerned, he had no mother. That's what I told mother-in-law. "David, don't say things like that. I really want to celebrate you. Don't be angry, okay? I won't say anything more. Let's lift the mood and enjoy the wedding, shall we?" His mother-in-law turned a sickly pale at David's words. In a fluster, she tried to gauge his mood. However, there was nothing she could say now that would make David listen. "Today's not only about me, it's about Catherine, too. We're a team, we're one. Looking down on Catherine is just like looking down on me. I get it, you don't want to celebrate us. So just leave now. Get out." Her apologies were nothing more than self-preservation. There was no sincerity towards me. David told her mercilessly to get out. He told her that I was his only family. "I can't believe this, David." Upon hearing David's words, his mother stood there, dumbfounded. It seemed she hadn't expected such clear repulsion from her son. A cold gaze was cast upon her by David, me, David's father, and the rest of the relatives. Having lost all allies and standing alone, she finally accepted the reality. Her only option was to leave the scene. After she had gone, I quickly changed my dress, took David's hand, and we returned to the venue hand in hand. Guests, who were oblivious to the turmoil that had occurred. Although we had kept them waiting for a considerable length of time, they welcomed us back with a round of applause. It seems everyone had sensed the situation and kindly waited for us. I was truly grateful for this warm atmosphere. And the wedding reception, now devoid of my mother-in-law, proceeded smoothly, with David and I preparing to give our final speech. We made sure to apologize sincerely for the disruption caused by my mother-in-law. And so, we managed to conclude our reception without further ado. Following this, true to David's declaration, we decided to completely distance ourselves from my mother-in-law. David changed his contact information, making sure no communication came through from her. He even proposed that we move homes, even though we just settled into our new one. Realizing David's firm intent to sever all ties with mother-in-law, I agreed to the move. The moving expenses were covered by my father-in-law, citing the troubles caused by my mother-in-law, and we promptly relocated to our new home. After ensuring our move was complete, father-in-law took the opportunity to serve mother-in-law with divorce papers. Father-in-law, too, had long harbored resentment toward mother-in-law's behavior towards me, and the incident at the wedding was the final straw. While a sincere apology ensured that our uncle, who was also a business associate, did not sever ties with us, he was completely fed up with mother-in-law. Mother-in-law was expelled from her family home, forced to embark on a lonely new life. Since David and I have no involvement, we have no idea about mother-in-law's whereabouts or her current state. Rumors suggest that due to the disgraceful display at the wedding, no family members are willing to aid her, and she is living a lonely, harsh life. Apparently, she's residing in a budget apartment, barely making ends meet by working part-time jobs from morning till night. On the other hand, David and I are enjoying a harmonious married life. We have no children. But, even without the blessing of children, we can live together for the rest of our lives. As long as we continue to respect and grow with each other every day, we can always be happy. David and I believe this, as we join hands and face our future together. Our hopes spread toward the future we are building together.